The Law Be With You podcast show, also known as Christian Fandom Geek on YouTube, is now part of the Red 5 network. Red 5 is a network of podcast shows aimed at bringing great quality content, especially Star Wars. And so look forward to some awesome collaborations on the Red 5 network with the Law Be With You podcast show.
There's one. Set for stun.
Welcome to the Law Be With You podcast show, also known as Christian Fandom Geek on YouTube. Hope everybody is doing well and keeping safe in the times that we're living in. There's a lot of news coming out about James Bond at the moment, and it's quite interesting, guys, because growing up, I was a huge James Bond fan. I think any young lad, to be fair, a young lad or young woman living in the UK, we it was part of the Britishness and the British culture. Quintessential thing about being British is that James Bond is a UK franchise. I think obviously it would be involving American film studios in a major way, but in terms of the origin, the books, and the cultural significance, certainly James Bond is a very British franchise. And so as a young lad, really as you know, kind of took to James Bond and had my favourite James Bonds, and don't ask me to name all the James Bond films, please, because there's so many of them, kind of thing. I think when I was younger, my favourite James Bond was probably Roger Moore, although I did like Sean Connery. I like the Sean Connery accent. That wasn't my best version of Sean Connery. Sean Connery, welcome to the Rock. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, Roger Moore was my favourite one. I think he had that suave and sophistication that I thought, yeah, this guy's a G. This guy's the guy. He's the man. And even like as the Bond films, you know, they had a bit of a break for a bit, and then they came back out in the 90s, and you had Pierce Brosnan as James Bond. A lot of his films were a lot of fun, actually. They started to get a little bit silly at one point where they started having. I remember the one with Halle Berry where they had an invisible car, and I thought, come on, guys, you're taking it too far now. That's just on another level, and it's like it got silly. Well, I think then they realised that they've pushed it too far with the gadgets, because obviously that's one of the great things about James Bond films is the gadgets, the cars, the unique, novel inventions that James Bond has to help him, and it's interesting because his little gizmos and gadgets, they're part of the storyline. You could say it's almost like a bit of a MacGuffin, but actually, in James Bond, because of how it's written, because it's coming from the books, I wouldn't even say they're a MacGuffin. That they're quite they bring a sort of continuity, and they bring a sort of pivotal moments in the saga where James is in a tough situation, and his watch that can shoot out, you know, laser beams or something like that, or whatever it can do, helps him out of a situation. But all these things are the reason why I felt that James Bond is such a good story, but also the character of James Bond himself, and whoever actor, whatever iteration of Bond was happening. You had guys like Sean Connery and Roger Moore bring something to the table that really elevated the character to and brought it to a next level. And obviously, in contemporary times, the most recent James Bond is Daniel Craig, and I wasn't convinced about Daniel Craig initially as a Bond, but actually, I have to say, he has had a good run as James Bond. I will still say this, guys, 100%. My favourite James Bond in recent times is Casino Royale. Probably, maybe even out of all the James Bonds, Casino Royale is an amazing film. They decided for Casino Royale to strip James Bond back. They weren't going to overload it with gadgets. They weren't going to do a silly car that got invisible and, is on the level of Tesla or SpaceX or something like that. They stripped it back, and they made it more about James Bond as a character, how he became James Bond. Daniel Craig's iteration of Bond is rougher, is more edgy. He doesn't mess around as much. Very physical with the fight scenes. Uh, Even attempted to do parkour in the opening chase, which is absolutely phenomenal, by the way. I think most of the guys, you guys and girls listening to the podcast show, have probably seen Casino Royale and probably enjoyed that parkour chase scene in Africa. That was just absolutely epic. And so these are the things that I love about James Bond. These are the things that are great and essential about a James Bond film. And there's a lot of other franchises that could learn from classic Bond films of how to craft a story, how to have continuity, in-world logic, how to use the gizmos and the things that are needed, that James Bond needs, how to use them in a way that brings continuity to the story, that's not ad hoc or all over the place sort of thing. And so yeah, these are some of the things that I've really enjoyed, and I am a James Bond fan. I think it's a quintessentially British franchise. I personally think there's a lot of life in the franchise, and in the next segment we're going to talk about some of the things that's been said recently by Daniel Craig, because there's a lot of talk in the latest James Bond film about, are they going to bring in identity politics because of the Me Too movement? Are they going to essentially water down James Bond, make him too politically correct? Obviously, James Bond as a character is a very suave guy, but he's edgy. He does things that are not politically correct. Sometimes the way that he treats women would not be seen as politically correct in the times that we are living in. Often using women as a sex symbol, or using them or seeing them as something as a means to an end, but often disrespecting that woman in the process. And we are in different times now. Those sort of things are frowned upon. So it is an interesting thing. And in the next segment, we're going to talk about what he said to do with James Bond, and especially talking about women, and also even sex bending. What he spoke about to do with women of colour, roles for people of colour, women of colour. We're going to talk about that in the next segment of the Law Be With You podcast show. Welcome back to the Law Be With You podcast show, also known as Christian Van Den Geek on YouTube. Before we get you to the next segment, I realised kind of post-production that there's a few awesome things I wanted to mention about this James Bond special edition, which I didn't actually mention before. So I thought, you know what, let me just get these things in there quickly. First of all is the amazing soundtrack, the main theme song by Chris Cornell, You Know My Name. A really enjoyable, fast-paced song, full of energy, full of verve. And it is my favourite Bond song out of all the Bond films. Now, I know that's controversial. I know a lot of you will disagree with me because you all have your own favourite Bond main theme. And obviously in the Bond films, in the Bond franchise, the theme song to the movie is a pivotal part of the movie. As soon as the movie starts and has the opening segment, straight away the theme kicks in and it lights up the film. So, you guys might not all agree with me, but for me, that fast-paced Chris Cornell song is amazing. The next thing I wanted to mention as well was the fighting style of the James Bond film, especially in the Daniel Craig run of films, is very fast-paced martial arts style, modelled after the Jason Bourne movies. So if you're into the Bourne Supremacy, the Bourne Ultimatum, then you will know that Bond has been influenced by Jason Bourne, that sort of fast-paced martial arts Krav Maga style. It's very cinematic and looks good. It looks good as well. And so they're just a few things I wanted to mention. And if you haven't watched the Jason Bourne films, I recommend go and watch the Bourne Supremacy. Watch those movies, and you will see how much they remind you of James Bond, and you'll realise actually it's the Jason Bourne films that have influenced the Daniel Craig run of James Bond films. So, just thought I'd get you this little segment in there, and we'll get you to your proper segment now, and be with you very soon in the next segment.